How's it going, everyone? My name is Chris. I'm the editor of Brewbound.com. To my right is a man who many of you guys probably already know, Brad Hittle, the founder and CEO of Two Roads, who's hosting us tonight for our final Brew Talks event in the year. How about a round of applause for Two Roads?
Welcome. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Free beer, enjoy it.
Yeah. Don't tell them that. They're all going to run away. So yeah, as Brad mentioned, plenty of beer that you guys already got in the back. We're going to be going for about an hour here. We have 2 conversations on tap tonight. So if at any point you guys need a refill, don't be bashful. Just get up and go get it. I won't mind at all. Tonight here with Brad, at least, we're going to be just kind of catching up a little bit on the Two Roads business and picking his brain. Obviously, I think everyone in the beer industry these days pays attention to the trends, the headlines, things that are happening out in the space. And it's pretty rare that you get an opportunity to talk to a guy like Brad and just see what he's thinking about everything that's happening out there. And there's certainly a lot of news that's happened already this year. So kind of going to get his thoughts and talk about a variety of things. Obviously the surge in merger and acquisition activity lately, the increase in sort of contract brewing opportunities that are out there now, which is obviously relevant being here at Two Roads, which does a number of contract brews for folks. Strategies for financing a fast-growing brewery, obviously topical here. You guys are growing pretty fast. So we're just going to kind of start diving right into that and explore. But first, talk to me about Two Roads, man. How are things going?
Well, things are going great. Knock on woods and barrels and everything else. But we started less than 2 years ago in December of 2012. That's when we started selling beer. It was an incredible whirlwind process. We came up with a business plan in about April of 2011. I was talking to Jeff Nelson earlier. He goes, "I remember you came up to me in San Francisco at the CBC and said your idea." And I said, "That's really dumb." and then I met. Then I went and met with. I had lunch with.
That's how you know it's a really good idea.
I said my stubbornness made me do it after that. But I met with a couple other key industry people that I knew, and they all said, "Oh God, you're smoking something. You need to hang around with Tony a little bit." But we actually finalized the plan in April of 2011, and we said, "Okay, we're going to raise money. We're Fairfield County, and we could do that, no problem." And July came around. We didn't have a dollar in our hand, and we were already negotiating on the acquisition of this building.
Wow.
We didn't have $1, and then I was very close to taking another job, and I met a guy. He's sort of a friend of mine, and I told him the idea, and he said, "Come see me tomorrow." And I went and saw him the next day, and he said, "I'm in." And so I had an anchor investor, and I thought, wow, with that, this is going to be great. I'll get the banks. I've got this guy with a lot of money, and we'll raise more money, and the banks would not lend a dime. It was an amazing process.
Even to somebody like yourself with plenty of experience working for Pabst.
Yeah, no. The whole macroeconomic situation was terrible. We were emerging from the recession. Banks were in a state of disarray because of the Dodd-Frank legislation, which really was nebulous about what they could and couldn't do. So they were very risk averse. And in the end, we all had to take personal guarantees on everything. And so here I sit today, very nervous.
You don't look it.
Well, I am. And so with that, we raised the money, and then we started negotiating in earnest on the building. I'm telling you the story because there's some funny little anecdotes. We ordered the equipment before we had a contract on the building.
Wow.
Because we're dumb. Sometimes stupidity pays off, it really does. And then we opened up in December of 2012, and our business model is unique. We're called Two Roads for a couple of reasons. Number one, it has to do with the Robert Frost poem, which I've always loved. It's about not only taking a road less traveled, but really celebrating the juncture where you're deciding where you want to go,
right,
and examining all these different pathways. And that's sort of our philosophy here as a company. And then, of course, it's a dual business model, as you all know. We contract brew, and we do our own proprietary brand, Two Roads. So there's 2 components to the business, and right now both are going exceptionally well. We thought this year, when we wrote the business plan, that we'd be somewhere around 40,000 barrels in volume,
That's
And,
both
the
own
Two
brand
roads
and
and contract, and we're going to do 75,000 barrels this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how much of that? Nice. Yeah. How much of that is contract? How much of that is the Two Roads brand?
Two Roads is if all goes well, between now and the end of the year, we will reach regional status
Wow.
as a brand and be just about 15,500 barrels, and the rest will be contract.
Now, do you envision that pendulum sort of swinging back the other way, because obviously skewed more heavily towards the contract end of things now? As you grow, how do you see the Two Roads business changing?
Well, we wanted, through all my experience with other companies and contracts and negative, just really bad experiences, we wanted to create a place where brewers who needed capacity could come not for a stopgap solution, but for a long-term solution. So we're going to continue to expand our capacity to open it up for our customers and ourselves. We don't see ourselves throwing people out, which would be a terrible thing. We're not living up to our end of the bargain.
Right.
So we're going to keep growing, and the mix is going to probably level out closer to 50-50, because some of those contract customers are going to get really big and they want to go to a bigger solution. Some of them might build their own brewery eventually as they do become more financially, have more liquidity, and so forth. And we anticipate that. That's part of the challenge of this job, though, is forecasting.
Yeah.
Because usually people are forecasting for their own brand. But now we're forecasting for 13 other brands, and not just how those brands are doing, but what is their corporate strategy?
Right.
Do they intend to stay here forever? Everybody says yes, or not, most people say. Our customers are wonderful. They're really good business partners. They're really forthcoming about what they want to do. But still, the forecasting is a real challenge.
So how much access are you guys given to, sort of their long-term plans and their, personal growth projections for their businesses?
Well, most of them are, we require a 2-year forecast. Whether or not they're really going to do it, we'll never know. But I mean, most of them have come very close so far.
Wow.
And so that helps us understand where we're going to be in 2 years. And that's about as big a window as you can ask for,
Now, when you're growing as fast as you guys are, obviously, we already talked about some of that being contract, but the Two Roads brand itself is, in 2 years going to reach regional status, which is pretty phenomenal on its own. How do you make sure that you don't get derailed and you're not growing sort of beyond your means?
A growth beyond your means is a real risk for every brewery. You have to constantly contemplating how far do you go, so that you can still control the destiny of your brand. And the luxury of our business model is that the contract side of the business pays some bills,
Right.
so that we can carefully nurture our brand and not feel the need to throw distribution way out there and hope it works, and collect dust on the shelf if it doesn't work, which is a travesty for anybody. So we're able to carefully nurture our brand. We're investing in really good salespeople. We're working very closely with our distributors to make sure that we're co-investing and strictly adhering to the brand's principles, and just really being cohesive about what we do and just not throwing it out there. So it's really about the luxury of controlling your distribution, controlling your growth. When you get to the right stage, go to the next contiguous market, which we're about to do, and repeat that formula over and over again, and not ship 8 states away and hope.
Which market is that?
We're going into upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and eastern Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And our philosophy, our whole strategy is go in with people, resources. Don't go in if there isn't a good enough awareness of the brand and our reputation isn't out there yet, we don't go. But right now, like our Megan, who's here, she's our new market business development person. She goes out and she talks to retailers, consumers, and distributors, and makes sure it's really market research to make
Right.
sure that Two Roads is going to be welcomed, and there's a lot of awareness for the brand, and it's out there, then we can go.
So, you had mentioned that there's at least some co-investment in the brand. What does that investment look like for you guys? I know that, I talk to brewers all the time and distributors all the time about, picking up a new brand, and they're wanting to be some kind of marketing commitment behind the brand, and that functions a little differently for everyone. How does it work for you guys?
It does function differently for everybody. I mean, if you're a very regional brand, then your investment's all going to be about in a very, very concise geography. For us, it's the fundamentals, which is point of sale, merchandising, tap handles, truck paints, but most important for us is that we feel that connecting with consumers is a big part of the game.
So how do you guys do that when you're entering a new state, or even drilling down in a state, say like Massachusetts, which I think you just entered this year, right?
Yeah.
So
it's first of all, the distributor really has to buy into our philosophy, which is taking the road less traveled and doing things uniquely, differently, and then that gets translated into local events, festivals, charitable activities, things that cost a lot of money because it's feet on the street. And it takes a lot of organization to do it right, but that's what we try to do to connect with consumers and retailers so that there's an emotional bond to the brand and not just trial happening in an antiseptic retail grocery aisle.
Right.
We have great products, and that's the number one step, but the connection to the consumer is the most important part about it. And right now we have about 3,700 points of distribution in the 4-state area we have. We have about 1,700 on-premise accounts. In Connecticut, we have about 1,200 in total.
Wow.
We have 400 on-premise draft accounts, and that's where you really, really connect with the consumer is in those venues.
What's it like building a brewery and building a brand in Connecticut? It's a smaller market, not necessarily thought of as, a hotbed for craft beer. When you look at some other markets like Portland, Oregon, or Denver, Colorado, say. What's it been like in the 2 years that you guys have been here, just kind of trying to establish a foothold and grow a brand?
Yeah. I think it'd be fair to say that for all the Connecticut breweries, there's now, I think, 26 or 27. It's fantastic right now. Connecticut was behind. For a lot of reasons, not just one, but it's really coming on as a craft state. When I wrote the business plan, I think there were 6 breweries. Today there's 26 or 27.
And there wasn't a guild until 2012, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah. So you have that factor. There's more craft breweries. They're all making very good beer, and of course that is the number one step. The distributors in Connecticut. This is a national trend. Distributors used to, just collect brands and go out and do what they always did for the last 80 years. But the distributors in Connecticut and by and large in many markets are now understanding how to do craft beer selling. And so that part has been incredibly rewarding. Our distributors in Connecticut are fantastic. They have craft teams. They speak the language. They're all properly trained. And importantly, we get on the phone with them and we solve problems.
Right.
It's not the usual pushback, call me in a month, wait for the planning meeting. They're like, yeah, let's solve that problem. Let's get after it. And so that part about it has been great here in Connecticut.
And it hasn't always been like that?
No. I can tell you from my experience at Pabst and back in the old days at Labatt USA and Rolling Rock, it was not always like that.
Yeah. Well, any horror stories from those days that you're able to share?
We don't have enough time.
Nice deflection. All right. I'm going to dive right back into it. So
I've got some stories later.
Yeah.
Just give me another beer and I'll open up.
Man, another round.
Social lubrication.
No, in speaking about Connecticut, it's interesting because last week Bob Pease from the Brewers Association went on CNBC, or maybe it was last week, beginning of last week, and he had made some comments about Connecticut being, one of the worst states for craft beer in terms
onerous.
of onerous laws.
Yeah.
But you you guys have been able to flourish, obviously, in the last 2 years. Any sort of response to those remarks? I mean, can you elaborate on what he might have been referring to?
I think he was making a gross generalization. I think that Connecticut is, like many states, it has a franchise law, and those franchise laws have been in place. There have always been good reasons for them for both sides of the table. They're changing. The changes you see in New York are pretty good. But Connecticut, you can appeal to the state and get out of a contract. You have to go to the Liquor Commission. So I don't view it as any more strained than most of the rest of the country. I think distributors are smarter now. They're not collecting brands like they were in the 90s. And so the need to get out isn't as prevalent as it used to be. Obviously, there are people who want to get out.
Right.
But from that perspective, I think the distributors are much smarter about who to take on and what to do with the brands, and a lot of them are willingly, shedding them. So I don't think I think it's a bad rap for Connecticut. I really do.
Well, keeping with the sort of Connecticut line of questioning, are there any specific trends that you notice here in Connecticut, I guess with respect to maybe the retail marketplace or just styles? And what do you sort of pay attention to when you look at Connecticut compared to the rest of the country?
It's no different than the rest of the country. There's incredible proliferation. Holding on to tap handles is a really tough order. The beers are all good in Connecticut. 20 years ago, the few breweries that were out there, maybe not so good, but now, everybody makes great beers. Retailers, I think the shakeout, if there is going to be one, is going to have to do with the retailers getting upset about shelf movement. You can go out and in a big account that has maybe 200 or 250 SKUs, and I did this the other day, and I saw a major West Coast brewer, great name, great reputation, a 1.5-year-old 6-pack on the shelf.
Wow.
With old graphics. And in the end, the retailer is going to start looking at, velocity and saying, wait a minute, I can do better here. And they're going to put some statistical measurements in place to improve the performance of the shelf. And that's where you're going to have some people get shaken out.
Could it be that maybe just the marketplace hasn't caught up, quite as fast here in Connecticut to, have 250 brands on the shelf? I mean, maybe in a market that's more saturated with craft brands, or where craft is a little bit more popular, there can be that many brands on the shelf, but maybe Connecticut not so much. Is that part of it?
Maybe. I think that the retailers in Connecticut are rapidly educating themselves about craft. We have these guys in here all the time. We give them training sessions about beer, how it's made, shelf life. So if that is the case, it's not going to be the case very long. I think the retailers in Connecticut are really craft savvy now, and our distributors are educating them about it. I think the retail community in general, not just Connecticut but everywhere, could do a lot for the craft segment by initiating things like glassware cleaning training. How do you clean a pint glass? How often? Line cleaning. How do you serve a glass? What's the best head for it?
Just at the on-premise level?
Just in the on-premise,
Yeah.
To make the experience for the consumer, for their drinker, that much better. Because you have a bad experience and you're losing a customer, the craft segment might lose a customer, they might bum out. You've got this transition going on right now between, people who were once loyal to Bud Light and Miller Lite, who are beginning to make forays into the craft area. Thank you very much, Blue Moon, for committing fratricide. Because the once very loyal drinker who was like, I will drink nothing but this beer, has been asked by their brand to try something. So the act of treason has crept into their mind. And those people are going to go venture off. And if they go venture off and try something and it's bad, what do? The natural reaction is to go back to what you're used to. So I think retailer education and practices is a really big avenue and opportunity for brewers and distributors to help them with.
And hopefully brewers actually making, quality liquid as well.
Hands down, that absolutely has to happen.
Let's not put all the blame on the retailers. I mean, there are some brewers out there. You heard Gotts at the CBC this year talking about 7 out of 10 beers that he tried was, not up to his standards.
Yeah.
So clearly there are some issues at the brewery level as well.
Well, there are, and I think a lot of, we're in a luxurious position because we're well capitalized, and we, right from the get-go, we said we have to have the best equipment, and we have to have the most versatile equipment because of our customers primarily in terms of package sizes and cork and cage and all kinds of stuff like that. But the best lab equipment. So we hired a Yale PhD microbiologist who's a home brewer. We invested a huge amount of money, and we're continuing to do it in labs. But not everybody's in that luxurious position, and so that type of product quality is going to be potentially an issue for some people. And then, of course, formulations and everything. There's this arms race out there about who can make the craziest, wildest beer, and it's fun. It's really fun for the consumer. It's really hard for the brewer to manage that, and the distributors.
Yeah.
But quality is quality. It absolutely has to be there.
Right. Speaking of the investment piece, you guys are obviously, I guess, in the midst now of about a $2+ million expansion here.
4.7.
Okay. It was 2 million when we reported on it earlier this year. So
we're not good at budgeting.
Yeah, I guess that number went up. How are you guys accessing that capital now? I mean, is that still angel investment? Is it bank debt? I mean, what's been your approach?
Fortunately, we have not had to go out and get more debt or equity investment yet. Our cash flow has handled the vast majority of it. We have a lead investor who's very friendly, and we use his line of credit on a few little things, which I'm telling you, getting stuff from banks is still very difficult. I'd rather do that because I don't want to owe him so much, but it's mostly cash flow.
All right. Well, I don't know if there's any bankers here tonight, but you seem to have the kinds of numbers that they're probably looking for, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Well, since we're on the topic of money and capital, I figured I'd kind of use that as the starting point for a little word association game that I like to play. I'll just toss out a topic. You tell me your thoughts. I'll just kind of leave it there on the table. Let's start with one that's sort of on everyone's mind lately, the M&A space. A lot of it's heating up. What are your thoughts?
French fries.
Yeah, awesome. Is that your newest creation with your Yale microbiologist?
Right. Yes, that's right. Yeah, instead of donuts, we're putting French fries in there
all right.
for carbs.
Or Scrapple if you're dogfish beer.
It's really interesting. The PE side of it, they're not friends and family for most part. When they invest, there's an expected return. I think that return in today's economy the percentage might be coming down, but they want a return, and they want it in a certain amount of time. And so that changes that dynamic in terms of what your strategies and tactics are. Private equity, like when Pabst was bought, the guy who bought it, the first day that he showed up, he walked in the front door, looked at the newspaper, and said, "Cancel that subscription." That's 25 cents. I'm not kidding. And so there's a different mindset.
Yeah.
And that affects decision making. The brewer wants to go out and buy Jordanian sage seeds that'll cost $30 a barrel. The private equity guy is going to say, "Oh, now hold on a minute. Exactly what is that going to do for us?" And there's everything is payback and return, which is it's good to run a business and try to make money, but you're going to have that on a much more frequent focus and the basis, and the relationship is going to be more strenuous, obviously.
So it seems like you're suggesting that brewer independence might be at risk when private equity money enters the space.
I think that's a possibility. I'm not privy to the meetings between a brewery that just had a minority stake from a consumer product private equity group to come in, but my guess is Yeah, it's at risk.
Even
The
in
creativity,
even in a minority
the
deal.
flexibility. Hey, I want to give this guy a little cash spiff. He did a great job. I'm going to give him, a reward at
Right.
the end of this month. I don't know. How is that going to play out with a private equity guy? That's money that could have gone to me, the private equity guy, and my investors who expect me to deliver.
A
I put
return.
money in your fund, and I expect you to give me 15%. So that would be my concern.
Even in minority deals?
I'm sure the minority deal has some oversight.
Interesting.
They don't just passively invest and hope it does great.
What about, if you kind of step away from private equity, what about, the strategics? And, we've seen a number of creative options like, the ESOPs. Harpoon just did one. You got Deschutes has sort of dipped its toe in the water a little bit. Obviously, New Belgium. What do you think about those options?
Well, the strategic part, it's really interesting. It has been hard to understand what the strategy is of, say, ABI, but now you're getting glimpses of it. Maybe
Right.
they have a regional geographic strategy and picking up a Blue Point and the group out in the 10 barrel, but I can't figure out what the end game is for that, other than just finding breweries and hope they grow up and utilize capacity at their breweries. The ESOP theoretically is great because you're getting employees as owners and they're all motivated and part of the team, and that's what we like here. We like to treat our employees extremely well, reward them, and feel like they're part of the team. ESOPs are, there's a lot of debt involved with ESOPs, and you get debt involved, and all of a sudden, the flexibility, the financial flexibility to do creative, innovative things. That's not just product development, that's how you sell, that's the things you do in the marketplace, it's the charitable activities you do. You begin to feel the pressure,
Right.
but theoretically, it's wonderful because the employees are part of it.
It seems like there's, if it isn't already happening, there might be a time here pretty soon where there's going to be a lot of breweries sort of sitting between a rock and a hard place, right? Wanting that capital to do a lot of these fun things, or to expand their breweries, or to invest in a lab, or do the types of things that's going to make them a better brewery business, but not knowing exactly where to access that capital, and assessing their options, whether that's some kind of liquidity event through an ESOP or a private equity firm. It seems like a tough place to be. Any insight into how breweries are going to be thinking about these kinds of decisions down the road, or have you given it any thought for yourself? I know you're only 2 years in here at Two Roads, but have you guys kind of thought about that?
Well, the answer to the first part of the question is based on the amount of stainless steel that I see being purchased these days. People are not having trouble getting money to build breweries. It's incredible. I think the macroeconomic conditions are conducive to that. You have there's a fear of the equity markets. Where do I put my money? I'm only earning a 0.5% in money markets, and so money's being thrown around a little bit. That could change if the economy does some not so great things.
Right.
So on the micro side, wow, there's money out there. For us, our plan, this is a big building. We want to be a regional brewer. We don't want to be a national brewer. We want to kind of stick to our knitting, what we do well, and keep our customers and grow into this place that you see here. And 8 or 9 years from now, we'll face a decision. Okay, do we have another 30,000 square feet that we rent out? Is that the time to go in there and build a bigger brew house? We'll be in a luxurious position to make that decision or not.
Right.
And that is why 4 years ago, when I said I wanted to get into the brewery business of owning and running one, I wanted to have some flexibility. And by having the contract side of this, we attain that.
Right.
And but we had to be kind of first mover advantage on that to get in there, because a lot of people have come along behind us.
Yep.
And the beauty of having first mover advantage is that we were able to cherry pick and attract really good contract partners. who had great brand propositions, really good beers, and actually help our reputation a little bit. Like, we make beer for Evil Twin, and he's got a good reputation, and we make beer for, Lawson's Finest in Vermont, and so we're in a wonderful position in terms of flexibility, and I thank God for it. It's incredible.
All right. So let's just jump right into that one then, since we're on the topic. Yeah.
What do you want to know about Two Roads?
Contract brewing, Brew Hub. Seeing some smaller guys, try to do it on a much more micro level. There's a guy in Boston trying to get one off the ground. What are your thoughts on contract brewing and where all that space is sort of headed?
Well, there's certainly demand for it. I can tell you, we get requests very regularly. Some of the requests are outlandish, as you would expect, and others are serious, the real deal. And so there's demand. And as long as this segment, the craft segment, continues to grow and do well, which again is predicated on really good products, good packaging, good positioning, there will be that demand.
Right. Is it a problem if there's, a bunch of craft beer companies starting up that don't actually own a physical location? I know that was, a concern, at least at one point in time, that breweries, were starting up on a contract basis, and they didn't really have a place to call home. And you see actually a lot of contract brands that, I don't know, take 21st Amendment, for example, that kind of go down that path, get to a point, and then, actually pull back and say, we got to have a place to call our own. Do you see that sort of being problematic as more people try to get into the space, and maybe the easiest way to do that is by contracting?
Well, I think historically it's been problematic because the number of breweries out there who could make beer for people were limited, and they couldn't guarantee a new customer a long-term home. So you get in there, and it might be an older brewery. They might have some space for a while, and then all of a sudden they don't. So you want to be able to control your destiny, which is why some people opt to pull back and say, I'm going to do it on my own now. Once you've established a brand and you're doing well, so there's that factor, and I think we're in a sweet spot because we take on established brands who have contract brewing needs, or a gypsy brewer who's a bona fide, legitimate, really exceptional brewer who has no capacity and is looking for a home rather than literally being a gypsy and going around 10 different breweries around the world, and there's a lot of travel involved and everything else. And
right.
We got a great state-of-the-art system here. So for them, it's great. But it is a little alarming for me when I get emails, very frequently. Hey, I just finished my third home brew, and my bevy of friends love it. I'm looking for a place to make it. Can you do it for me? And what do I have to do?
Yeah, I'm ready to move out of the garage. Mom's kicking me out of the basement.
What I love about it is that there's so much passion about beer.
Yeah,
it's incredible, and that's great. And I don't want to tamp that down. I mean, people love beer, and they talk about it very, very strenuously and stridently and with fervent conviction. So there's something very cool about the beer industry and craft beer. But to take it from the romantic notion of that into a business is a big leap.
Right. Got to temper it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Session IPAs. I'm drinking one right now. Real trend. Here to stay.
I think it is. How big it gets is who knows. It's like when Adam met Eve, he said, stand back, I don't know how big this thing's going to get.
Nice.
Sorry.
Yeah. Dave, did you get that one? Check that one out on the site tomorrow. Yeah. No, I mean, we see a lot of breweries, kind of exploring that space. It seems like the natural progression, right? IPAs are the hottest category, why not make something that you can drink more of and kind of have the same types of character, right?
Well, people have expectations when they drink a craft beer. It has to be truly a craft beer, and if you go sessionable, you have to have some kind of attribute to make it worthwhile. Otherwise, you're dangerously getting back into the macro game. So, these sessionable IPAs, they still have to be distinctive,
right,
and complex and interesting. And as long as the craft industry does that and doesn't wade into that gray area where you're getting right back to where we're trying to get from, I think it's going to be a viable segment.
And I do sort of wonder, if now craft beer is sort of becoming synonymous with just like hoppy beer. It's like IPAs are so popular. That's probably a lot of people's first experience with craft beer now. And then you see the next sort of trend coming along behind that is just a lower alcohol hoppy beer. Is that a risk at all, that that's sort of what ends up being perceived, that you're drinking a craft beer and now it's going to be just something that tastes bitter? And there's nothing else to be explored within the framework of beer, stouts and pilsners and everything else.
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, I don't. I think our best seller is a double IPA, Road to Ruin, but in New York, where there's a lot of really craft aficionados, our Pils is the number one seller. And in the tasting room, No Limits Hefeweizen is the number one seller. So I don't feel that that's...
Still plenty of diversification there.
Yeah.
All right. Bi-coastal breweries. There's a lot of West Coast breweries moving east. Haven't seen any East Coast breweries move west yet. Is this something that we can expect more of?
Yeah, I think so. Water, it's an issue clearly in California, and probably a few other states. Freight is, the price of oil is coming down, price of gas is coming down, but still, $4 a case, that's a big hit.
Wouldn't you rather see them brew here at Two Roads?
Yeah. Yeah. We got 30,000 feet over there for sale. But yeah, I think you're going to see more of that. But to go national, it's really hard. You have to have a lot of resources if you want to go national, because you have to go to good sales coverage. You have to have really good distributor relationships, and you got to get people to try your beer. And they require a lot of effort, a lot of resources.
Right. Speaking of going national, how many national brands can there be?
Not many, because of the resource question. You can't expect it. It's the throw it out there problem. If somebody wants to, I just started a brewery in New Mexico. I'm going to expand it to 100,000 barrels and ship everywhere because I got the greatest IPA in the history of IPAs.
Right.
That would be a real problem. That would be a mistake. And just throw it out there and hope that the greatest IPA in the world sells itself.
Well,
it won't.
The next year there'll be another greatest IPA in the history of the world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think there. It requires a lot of resources and smart thinking and working with distributors and brand awareness. In the end, it's all about getting awareness, trial, repeat.
Right.
And not that many people are going to be able to do that.
So do you see then the sort of the industry taking shape on more of a regional basis and kind of returning to this place of strong?
Not being Nostradamus or anything,
right.
But that's kind of my belief.
We're not asking you to be.
I think it is going to be that.
Right.
I think there are going to be a few key national players. My worry is that with so much capacity being built up out there, if it all doesn't get used, then what's the next phase of pricing? And that'll hurt everybody.
So you see pricing coming down potentially at some point, and being sort of a race to the bottom, or?
That is a potential scenario. It's not a guarantee, but it's potential.
How do you curb that? How do you stop that from happening?
drink a lot of beer and forget about it.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that one,
if
Chris.
if you can afford it, right?
Yeah. No, it's well, I mean, your strategy can take that into account. There's the risk reward. There's all kinds of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and pricing is a potential threat. So you have to think about that as you plan your business out every single year.
Yeah.
Every single year you have to think about that, and you got to sit with your distributors and think about it. And you better be sure to get the data about what's going on in your markets to know where things are trending.
Well, and I mean, it's sort of interesting to think about pricing sort of at the consumer level as well. I mean, as I think everybody knows, I mean, millennials are sort of driving it, right? They're driving this craft movement, but, at some point, those millennials are, going to get married and have a kid and have to pay for diapers and everything else, right? And does that change how they spend their dollars, which might have previously been allocated to a $10 six-pack? Where does that money go now? Do you think about that ever? And
oh yeah, I mean, millennials are now they've hit the asymptote, and they're trending downwards in the total quantity, the number of millennials for one thing. And as that pig in the python moves along, you're absolutely right. Discretionary income is going to go to a mortgage, diapers, and everything else. And what's coming behind is a much smaller group. So I don't want to be doom and gloom, because I think the craft segment always has the advantage of taking advantage of the crumbling monolith of the mainstream beers.
Right.
And if one share of mainstream is 2 million barrels, if you assume that 100% of that goes to stays in the beer business and doesn't go to spirits and wine, still 2 million barrels to be kind of divvied up. That's a lot of beer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it will be interesting to see how that sort of next demographic comes along and how their spending habits change. Any insight from your years at Pabst that kind of inform your thinking now here at Two Roads on those consumer trends?
No, I think that what I learned at Pabst is that centralizing a business and trying to have one communication and one way to go to market, it doesn't work. You have to empower people to define the brand and locally, and that was a key learning for me at Pabst, and being able to connect with consumers, and that's the key learning that I still have from Pabst, and also from Rolling Rock, but really from Pabst, is that. I don't have any demographic knowledge that I can impart right now.
Sure.
From there.
Either that, or you just want to keep it close to the vest.
Believe me, I would tell you.
So I'll ask one I'll toss one final talking point out there. We talked a little bit about craft styles and trends and session IPAs, and IPAs being so popular. What's the next IPA? It seems like everyone is looking for the next thing that is going to be on fire like IPA. Any thoughts? What's the next IPA?
That's there's just so many potential ways that can go, and it's really hard to predict. It's funny, Phil, our brewer, Phil Markowski's been at it for 25 years, and if I asked him that question, he goes, "I'm not going to tell you."
Well, I'd hope not. I'd hope he'd keep it in the brew house, right? And he's probably cooking it up in the lab somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Well, really appreciate it, Brad. Thanks
you.
for having
Yeah,
us.
it
How
was
about a
fun.
round of applause?
Thank you.